That may be the greatest catch I've ever seen in my life.
All right, guys, a very exciting announcement to make. I know we've been getting asked over and over and over again when our rookie rankings are going to be out, when we are going to have Dynasty rankings available. And to be completely honest, I know that it would have been fun to see them a while ago, but I wanted to take my time. I wanted to make sure that we are giving every prospect and their overall profile a decent amount of time to look through and make sure that I have the tiers set correctly with how I want them. That way we aren't going to have drastic changes after the NFL draft. But now those rankings are going to be available very soon over on Patreon. I know the majority of y'all are already supporting the show on Patreon, so I just have to say I truly appreciate it. I think we have over 200 members over there now. And yeah, just be on the lookout. I am going to be making it as a post. Maybe I decide to do a draft kit for people that aren't on the Patreon that won't have access to those rankings. And then you can buy it separately. But as always, you could just decide to support the show on Patreon. Not going to give you all the URL or anything. Just go to the comment section, go to the description of the video, and you can find it there if you would like to support the show. But that's it. What we are going to be doing in this video is we are going to be going through and we are going to be looking at the mock drafts that we've completed over on Patreon throughout the course of the offseason. And I'm going to be looking at 5 wide receivers that have continued to fall since we started drafting this offseason. And I had to kind of ask myself, oh, okay, I know what I thought of these players a month ago whenever they were valued a little bit higher than they are now. But now that we are going to be getting a discount on them, should we be aggressively targeting them? Should we still be looking to avoid and just not wanting to catch the falling knife? Well, that's what we're going to be talking about. And let's pull it up with my first wide receiver, someone that I've actually traded for twice already in some Flock Patreon Dynasty leagues. And this is going to be Odell Beckham Jr. Okay, so I understand. I want to get this out of the way right away. Y'all know I am biased with Odell. I mean, if you just look at the intro of the channel, it's supposed to be the Odell Beckham Jr. catch that he had against Dallas. No, I am not a New York Giants fan. I'm not an LSU fan by any means. I just really love the player, and I thought that he was unfairly criticized for a lot of the off-field antics, and I was just like, you know what? I don't care if people want to call him a diva. I am all in on this player. I love the talent with what we were able to see in that 2014 NFL draft, and obviously we have the Odell jersey behind us, and more so my bias just comes from the fact that I really dove into Dynasty Fantasy Football in 2014, and that's when Odell was coming into the league. That's when he had the historic rookie season, so he's always going to have a special place in my heart. But if we were going to be looking at this situation objectively, there are a couple things wrong with Odell here. One, I'm not extremely worried about a torn ACL. I'm not extremely worried about an injury lasting until the next season, unless it occurred halfway through the year, which happened with Odell Beckham Jr. This is not the case of a Courtland Sutton. This is not the case of a Saquon Barkley. With Saquon Barkley and Courtland Sutton tearing their ACLs in week 1 and week 2, they should be back by training camp. They should be 100% good to go in the NFL preseason, and really, they won't have any hesitations or setbacks at the start of the year. Whereas, in the case of Odell Beckham Jr., that's something that we have to be on the lookout for. And also with Odell, at this point, we have to say, what is the fit in Cleveland? Because I kind of got a lot of criticism last season whenever Odell Beckham Jr. went down to injury, and we know we had some other podcasters saying, hey, this is going to be good for the Cleveland Browns offense. They're not going to feel the need to force feed Odell, and they can spread the ball out. They can have a little bit more of a balanced attack. And I came on here, and I was probably just a little bit too emotional, probably just a little bit too in my feelings, but I was saying that's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my entire life. Odell Beckham Jr. leaving the offense is going to be a significant hit to Baker Mayfield and every other skill positional player because they're going to have a harder time stretching the field. And I don't know if it's a correlation causation thing where we are just looking like a fool for no reason, or Odell not being in the offense actually did open things up and allow them to be a little bit more balanced, because if you look at the split of the offense last season with Odell versus without Odell, I mean, it's kind of night and day with the Baker Mayfield performance where I was wrong. I mean, the offense did get better without Odell Beckham Jr. And looking at his contract, we have to ask ourselves, I mean, are they going to be willing to pay that type of money to Odell? Are they going to be willing to tie that up? Or maybe going into next season, not this one, they're going to want to get him off the books. They're going to want to make sure that they have a little bit more cap flexibility. Now, that's something we don't know. But what we do know is Odell Beckham Jr. has not had a good season in about 3 years now. He's coming off a significant injury. And at the same time, I mean, we know that if he has one more bad year, he's going to fall into the Sammy Watkins range. He's going to fall into the range of a dynasty wide receiver that literally has no value. That regardless of his production, he's going to be down there with the Cole Beasleys of the world. So I would have said definitely a year ago, definitely 2 years ago, not even particularly with Odell Beckham Jr., but with this profile of a wide receiver that I really liked, that got injured and saw his value kind of crater, I would have been all about aggressively buying him over and over and over again. But now we've kind of seen multiple examples of these players. Once they start to lose value like this, even if they have that bounce back season, their value is going to be a little bit capped in what it can get back to. And if they have one more bad year, the bottom can completely fall out. So with Odell, right now I'm seeing him go in the 8th, 9th, 10th round of Dynasty startup drafts. And I think in the 8th round, we are going to stay neutral at that price. In the 9th round and the 10th round, I would call him a draft target or a trade target if you're going to go in an established league. But if he's in that 8th round range, I think that we need to be a little bit more neutral and just say, I know it's boring, but it's probably a fair price. Okay, so now our next player, someone that I definitely whiffed on last rookie season. I mean, last rookie draft, we hit on a ton of things. We hit on A.J. Dillon, tripling his value for no reason, cashing out on that right now. We hit on Jalen Hurts. We hit on Justin Jefferson. But Henry Ruggs, a massive miss. I mean, I was consistently drafting him at the beginning of the 2nd round in Superflex rookie drafts. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I am getting the first wide receiver off the board. I know he profiles to be a field stretching option, not necessarily someone who's going to see a ton of volume. But regardless, he's going to be a day one player because of the impact he can automatically make, opening things up for the other players on the Raiders offense. So I was all in on drafting Henry Ruggs. But at this point, we have to say, what is the outlook of Henry Ruggs? Because the Raiders are a team that, A, doesn't have an elite quarterback. We know that's already going to cap his ceiling, especially when you are a field stretcher. I mean, just think across the NFL. How many field stretching wide receivers are coming through with consistent production and not needing that much volume? You have Tyreek Hill, you have Will Fuller, you have Brandon Cooks, and maybe 2 or 3 other guys I'm forgetting. But the sentiment is the guys that succeed in this profile are the guys that are attached to elite quarterbacks. Henry Ruggs does not have that with Derek Carr. At the same time, he's playing on an offense with Darren Waller, who is going to be soaking up so much of the volume every single season. And this is a team that drafted Bryan Edwards in the 3rd round. And y'all know, while I hated Bryan Edwards last offseason, while I thought that he was severely overvalued, still, a 3rd round investment is going to make it where if they can get him on the field, they're definitely going to want to. So with Henry Ruggs, I have a problem telling y'all to go out there and buy him. Personally, I am doing it, and maybe it's just a little bit of a bias in me. The problem here is very similar to Odell Beckham Jr. If Henry Ruggs comes out and has another poor season when he was already such a polarizing prospect coming into the 2020 NFL draft class, he is going to completely fall off to no man's land. I mean, he's going to be in the same range of how we are viewing N'Keal Harry currently. So if you're making the Henry Ruggs investment, I honestly think it's probably a bad investment to make just because he's a field stretching wide receiver. So the ceiling is going to be capped on what his volume can be. And at the same time, if he has another subpar season, that value is going to completely bottom out. All right, so now our next wide receiver, I'm just going to come out here and I'm going to say it. He's a buy. I am scooping him up every single time. Mike Evans. And this is an intriguing one for me because obviously we know why Odell Beckham Jr. is falling. Obviously we know why Henry Ruggs is. But in the case of Mike Evans, I really can't explain it. Maybe people are just bored. Maybe people are just tired of his production. Maybe it's that he came in that same 2014 NFL draft class, so it seems like he's been around for a very long time. But what we have to know with Mike Evans is he came in extremely young. I believe he was 21 years old as a rookie, and he started producing right away. So while we've been talking about him forever now, Mike Evans is still only 26, 27 years old. And when he's only 26, 27 years old, with the profile of a wide receiver that Mike Evans is, with the frame that he has where he's always going to be a red zone threat, I think Mike Evans quite possibly has another 4 to 5 seasons of top-end fantasy production. And right now, I am seeing him go in the 6th round of Dynasty Superflex startups. So while no, he's not a player that you can invest into and then see an immediate return where he goes from being a 6th round startup pick all the way up to the 2nd round next offseason. I mean, he's not like a Tesla stock or anything. He's more so the stock that you're going to buy, you're going to be getting dividends from for the next 5-6 years. And I think with Mike Evans at this price point, it's easily worth the investment. Not to mention that Chris Godwin could possibly leave Tampa Bay this offseason. Maybe they decide to spend money on the defensive side of the ball rather than franchise tagging Chris Godwin. And if that's the case, I mean, Mike Evans is going to see a bump up in target share from a point where he's already a consistent 1,000-yard producer every single season. So Mike Evans, I'm buying, not even thinking about it. And the same thing with our next wide receiver, another player that has been around forever, and another player that I think people are just kind of tired of. This is going to be Amari Cooper here with the Dallas Cowboys. And yes, I completely acknowledge the fact that CeeDee Lamb may easily be the wide receiver 1 on this team starting in his sophomore year. But while he can be it, we don't know 100%. And yes, I acknowledge the fact that we can safely say that CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 wide receiver in Dallas from a dynasty perspective with their long-term values. But with Amari Cooper, I mean, came in that 2015 NFL draft class, coming out of Alabama. We all started talking about him nonstop after his 2 years in the NFL of kind of splitting that wide receiver 1 role with Michael Crabtree. I mean, he was quite possibly the most polarizing player in Dynasty, where you pulled up a podcast in 2016. Literally, the only conversation was about Amari Cooper. It was Amari Cooper, Amari Cooper, Amari Cooper every single episode, just because some people thought that he was never going to be a wide receiver 2 or wide receiver 1 in fantasy. Some people thought that he was going to be the wide receiver 1 overall. And obviously, I'm a massive Amari Cooper fan. We have the Raiders jersey behind us, mainly because of my bias of just it being so hard into Dynasty Fantasy Football about 5-6 years ago. But with Amari Cooper, what I can say here is I can say he's just like Mike Evans, where he is so much younger than everybody assumes because we've been talking about him forever. He came in that 2015 NFL draft class, played his rookie season at 21 years old. So yeah, he's still a player, 26, 27. Amari Cooper is going to be a difference maker at the wide receiver position for the next 4 or 5 years. He's one of the safest assets that you can invest into. And while no, he's not going to be another player that we're talking about, maybe a Justin Jefferson, that can easily continue to rise in dynasty value. But on the flip side, Amari Cooper is someone that's going to have a very high floor. He's going to be someone we know is going to give us production. And if you started draft right now and possibly go 3 running backs at the very beginning, then get a stud quarterback in a super flex league and come away with Amari Cooper, Mike Evans in rounds 5 and 6 or 6 and 7, I mean, that's just a ridiculous start, and I could not be happier about that. All right, so now our last player we are going to talk about is someone that I thought we were not going to continue to bang the drum for because I've been talking about him for a while now. But he's going in the 14th, 15th, sometimes 16th round of these dynasty startups now. Christian Kirk for the Arizona Cardinals. And with Kirk, yes, he has been disappointing. Last year, he was more so used as a field-stretching wide receiver, something I did not understand at all. I mean, if you knew anything about Christian Kirk coming out of Texas A&M back in 2018, it's that he was a slot wide receiver, someone that you wanted to run routes underneath, and I know Larry Fitzgerald has been playing that role so far. And that kind of forced Christian Kirk to be playing as that field stretching option because DeAndre Hopkins isn't going to do it. We know that Larry Fitzgerald is not going to do it at the same time. So Kirk was very boom and bust this past year, and more so bust than boom, to be completely honest. Yet I think that at this point, he finally is a dynasty value where I don't think he has proven that he has been a subpar talent at any point throughout his entire NFL career. I think, if anything, he's proven to be the opposite. He's just been miscast in a role that doesn't suit him because of the personnel of the offense. But if we can finally get Larry Fitzgerald out of here, get Christian Kirk in the slot, and get all the defensive attention on DeAndre Hopkins on the outside, I think Christian Kirk could bounce back and be a high-end wide receiver 3, low-end wide receiver 2. And if you're going to get that in round 14, 15, 16 of a dynasty startup, and Christian Kirk is still on the younger side as he was drafted in 2018, that's something I'd be very happy about. All right, now, thank you guys. I really hope y'all enjoyed this video. I really hope y'all got something from it. As always, if y'all did, go down there, drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. It helps us out a ton, and I'll see y'all with the video tomorrow.